from the heart of rural France. This is the Keto Woman podcast, brought to you by me. Hello Keto Lovelies, I'm Daisy Brackenhall, and I've spent most of my life struggling with my weight and confidence, and have always had a difficult relationship with food. Even when I finally got to my target weight after weight loss surgery and eating low carb, I couldn't maintain it and I was miserable. I've been keto now for over 2 years, and it has given me the freedom to fall in love with food again, without the constant gain, loss, guilt, virtue cycle of before. Health and happiness is where it's at now, running on fat. Welcome to the Keto Woman podcast. Each week I'll be chatting to inspirational women, maybe even the odd man, to discover the secrets to their success so that I can share them with you. So what is keto? Keto is a way of eating that enables you to switch your body's main fuel source from sugar to fat. Who doesn't want to be a fat burner, right? But how do we achieve this? A great place to start is by keeping carbs under 20 grams a day. So things like leafy greens and above ground vegetables, plus some nuts and seeds and the incidental carbs you find in things like full fat dairy. Choose delicious fatty proteins and be free and easy with oily dressings on salad and butter on your veggies. Once you're in the swing of things, you can tweak it to suit you. Make your own personalized keto. You'll hear all sorts of ways to keto from my guests. There is no one way to do keto, no one size fits all. I hope to show you just how flexible and fabulous this way of eating can be. I'm not a doctor, and most of my guests won't be either, so we really can't give you medical advice. It's always best to consult your own doctor when making big changes to your diet and lifestyle, because they know you and your medical history, and so have access to the bigger picture. Wouldn't it be helpful to have one place where you could find all the links? Want to sign up to my new Patreon exclusive Facebook group, Daisy's Lovelies? No problem. How about subscribing to my YouTube channel? Please help me notch up my first 1,000 subscribers by going to links.ketowomanpodcast.com and following the YouTube link. Not following me on Instagram yet? Hit the Instagram button. You get the idea. All the buttons, all the links you need are at links.ketowomanpodcast.com. Thanks for joining me for episode number 120, where I am joined by extraordinary woman Raeann Sparks. Raeann is a teacher and certified keto coach at lipedemasimplified.org. She first discovered ketosis in 1972 when the Atkins diet for teens allowed her to overcome her stage 1 lipedema to become a lifeguard, swim coach and professional actor. But lipedema fought back and drove her backstage to teach acting and direct her own theatre school. In spite of low-calorie diets, lipedema then forced her out the stage door and into a city bus to drive and train bus drivers. Still struggling to outrun stage 3 lipedema, Raeann eventually collapsed into a wheelchair with early osteoarthritis. Diabetic, obese and judged too fat for knee replacement, Raeann desperately Googled lumpy legs and finally identified her foe, lipedema. With the help of Dr. Catherine Seo at lipedemaproject.org, she rediscovered her old familiar Excalibur, the ketogenic way of eating. Now strong, mobile, mentally clear and energetic again, Raeann has traded her wheelchair for a bicycle and is finally leaving lipedema behind in the dust. This is why she is so passionate about coaching others to achieve their own victories over lipedema and its complications using the ketogenic way of eating. Raeann has completed the professional training in LCHF, ketogenic nutrition and treatment with the Nutrition Network, an affiliate of the Noakes Foundation. She works with lipedemasimplified.org, coaching women on how to live their best lives with lipedema, lymphedema, and lipolymphedema. If you suspect that you may have lipedema, you can book a free consultation with Raeann or one of her fellow coaches at lipedema-simplified.org. I forgot to ask Raeann to share where you can find her online, but you can find all the links in the show notes at ketowomanpodcast.com/120. It was Mandy Staggs, who was on the podcast a few weeks back, who suggested I get in touch with Raeann to hear her story. I'm so glad I did. We ended up chatting for quite a while, so I've split the conversation in two. Here's the first part. Welcome, Raeann, to the Keto Woman podcast. How are you doing today?
Great, and thank you for having me, Daisy. It's very fun to be on.
You were just telling me before we started recording, I'm a Brit, so I have to talk about the weather, but you were saying you're just heading into a deep freeze by the sounds of it. What did you say? -30 centigrade?
Yes, we'll be getting down to that at night for sure, yes.
Very, very cold.
And we've got some snow, so...
Last time I was anywhere near close to that, I had awful problems with pipes freezing and things, so I don't envy you. I bet you're set up a lot better for it there, though, aren't you?
Oh, yes, we are. My house is sort of new, so I've got central heating and I've got an R2000 house, which means that it's very well insulated, and it's so airtight that it had to get an air system because it would be too airtight otherwise. So yes, I'm set up, and my heating bills are actually lower than the average Canadian because of that R2000 status that we built.
Perfect.
Our walls are thicker, and our windows are thicker too.
Well, I've definitely got thick walls, but yes, it's not the warmest of houses. I do not have central heating. Wood burning stoves are very charming, but they don't heat the whole house. Not in my case, anyway.
My grandfather had a potbelly stove all his life on his farm in Alberta, so it would be 40 below there, and he'd have his stove going. He burned coal. Yeah. I
bet anywhere further than a few meters away from that was pretty cold.
Actually, it was a little house, and so no, it was too hot.
Oh, wow.
I was dying when I was in there, but he was elderly at the time and had that thing just cranked up. I was 9 months pregnant, and I had to go get some Bermuda shorts of my grandmother's to wear. Or I thought, I'll either have to be naked or I'll have to go outside because I'm going to pass out.
I've been experiencing the pros and cons of hot flushes lately. The cons, obvious, they're not great, but the general higher temperature and the hot flushes are beneficial when your house is quite cold.
Yes.
I haven't felt the cold as much this winter, I have to say.
My mother maintains that she was never sick for 10 years because of the hot flashes. They killed the germs.
There are some benefits to it.
Yes.
Anyway, why don't you tell me about you?
I will. So I was born in Taber, Alberta, Canada, in the middle of the prairies, to a long line of lipedema ladies. I now have traced lipedema back to my great-grandmother, and so that's 5 generations going down now to my daughter as well, who is probably the only status Aboriginal person in Canada to have a lipedema diagnosis.
Oh, really?
Because I don't see it much in Aboriginal women. They seem to, Aboriginal and some of the East Asian people don't seem to have it as much. But she gets the lipedema from my side. Lipedema, I think, kind of killed my great-grandmother, she's Norwegian, and that's where it comes from, is the Norwegian side, the lipedema. And she died in a mysterious way fairly young and was huge. So huge that my mother said she could not sit on her grandmother's lap because she had no lap. So that means she had to be pushing 400 pounds because she was about my height. Actually looked a lot like me in the one picture I have of her. But she worked like a dog. She was a homesteader on the Canadian prairies, born in Minnesota, came up to Canada to have a homestead. And the homestead didn't work out because of of droughts, and they had to change to another place. She had 9 children, grew a garden. All the food is grown by her, mostly organic. She's working. She's a local midwife.
Wow.
Hitching up the horses and the team and the sleigh to go out in the middle of a winter blizzard at 30 or 40 below to go and deliver a neighbor's baby. And here she gets to close to 400 pounds. How does that happen, right? Obviously, SECO is not at work there, right? Calories in, calories out.
No.
She did like cake. It is said that she could see the dust in the distance of a neighbor coming to visit and could have a cake in the oven by the time they hit the door. So I guess she was insulin resistant. But anyway, so the lipedema comes down. My grandmother had it, my mother, me, my daughter. But of course, I didn't know I had lipedema. I just looked at my mother's legs in the swimming pool and said, wow, those are weird. But Auntie has them and Grandma has them. And so, it was kind of, oh, okay, but I don't have them. Lucky me. And I didn't really get them till I was about 30. But at age 13, I did notice that I went to buy well, first of all, at age 13, I was a chubby child, and I do remember insulin resistance when I was young. My mother kept sugar away from us, but I always wanted it. And then when we'd go somewhere special, I remember going to a circus or something where I should be interested in what was going on. But the whole time I was thinking, how can I get sugar? How can I get sugar? How can I get sugar? So I know at that time I was already being driven by that insulin resistance, probably at the age of 8 or 9. And so by the age of 10, 11, I thought I was quite chubby. I was always lived in fear of being teased for being fat, but I never was teased for being fat. Lucky me. But by 13, I decided to go on a diet because I was too fat for me and, terrified of the boys who threw crab apples at us and were very mean. And I didn't want to have the added thing of being fatty 2x4, right? So I went on a diet, and my mother this was 1972, my mother had a magazine. It was the Reader's Digest, and in it was the Atkins diet for teens.
Ah, interesting.
So I went on a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet at the age of 13, and I lost 30 pounds over the summer. And when I came back to school, I had the same teacher for a second year. He didn't recognize me.
I'm not surprised. That's a lot.
He said, "You girl, you're a new girl, aren't you?" He said. And 2 boys had a fight over me the first day. The boys didn't pay attention to me otherwise. So I did drastically change. So obviously, yeah, I was right. The insulin resistance and the Atkins diet was very, very helpful. But I did it just for the summer. I think I started when school was out, probably end of June. And then by the time school was in again, it was 1st of September, I had lost 30 pounds. I remember riding a bicycle and swimming a lot and, eating this strange diet that was in the magazine. Anyway, I was driven off it right about that time by hyponatremia, because I didn't know that I needed the salt. And one day I got up out of bed and fell back down.
Right.
Yeah. And I thought I was dying. And I'm 13 years old. I've got full-on hyponatremia. I got myself to the kitchen and ate a peanut butter sandwich, and that stopped it. Probably the carbohydrates in the bread, right? My mother kept saying, well, how can that be? Peanut butter, you're allowed on your diet. But it was the bread, I guess, because I didn't understand the sodium thing, and it didn't say anything about the sodium in that magazine, right?
What was specific about Atkins for teens? What difference was there to the adult one?
It's hard to remember because I'm now 60, but and that was when I was 13. But I remember that I think it was a little more lenient.
I was going to say that would seem logically, yeah.
I remember I could have I ate things like ketchup. I remember that. I remember eating hot dogs with ketchup. So I was having a few more carbs, but I don't really exactly remember what they were. It wasn't that hard, right? Because my grandfather had a farm, and we had lots of grass-fed organic beef and lamb and fish that he was also very into wild crafting. So we had rabbits and fish and Canada geese in our freezer. So we had a lot of wild and fatty meat he was very into, no hormones, and he would sell those. He would sell anything he'd had to give, even antibiotics to, only the clean stuff for the family, which is kind of novel for those days. That was 60s, 70s. And he even used to like to go gathering mushrooms and things like that. And my grandmother would say, that man's going to kill us one of these days. Because he was from England, and he wanted to be a cowboy, and he came out. Now he was into this wild thing. He wanted to be an Aboriginal, He used to have friends who were Aboriginal. Well, I could pretend I was Aboriginal, and I could hunt without a license. Whatever. So we had all this great stuff around, and I lost the weight, but the hyponatremia drove me off. And then, of course, there started to be there's always a backlash in the media, right? Anytime it gets popular. So that was the first popularity of the Atkins diet. And of course, there's a backlash, and there was a story in the news about some teenager who died on the Atkins diet or something. And then I thought, oh, that was, I almost died on the Atkins diet. really it was the hyponatremia, right? But that sort of stuck with me. And of course, then we went into low fat 80s. But that diet saved me because I was able to stay at a normal weight until I had my first child at age 30. So I was able to become a lifeguard and swimming instructor. I was able to become an actor and to be a professional actor for a few years and then become an acting teacher and not be burdened down by all of this weight. But at 13, after the diet, I went to buy a bikini because I could wear a bikini now. But I couldn't get a bikini that would fit because the top and the bottom had to be 2 or 3 sizes difference.
Right, yeah.
I couldn't fit in a regular bikini. So I remember my friend and I shouldn't admit this, we switched the bits. And you weren't allowed to do it in those days. You know, you had to buy the bikini. They didn't have the option. Nowadays, you can get a bottom and a top that are different sizes. But I remember that and thinking, how come? Why can't I fit into like all the other girls? Why am I not even figured? So my bottom was a little bigger than my top, even at age 13. It sort of progresses from there. So I had it in the hips and then it sort of moves slowly down and slowly up. But I stayed pretty good. And, you know, and when I was acting, I even did a nude scene in one play.
Wow, racy.
Yeah. Oh, yes. You know, I was a real actor, you know, and a member of Canadian Actors Equity. So by age 30, I'd sort of stopped. My acting career, when I graduated to about age 26, I played 15-year-old kids. I was on the children's theater circuit, mostly playing children. But then, when I played young girls, but then one day a director I worked with a lot said to me, "You're too old for this role." I was 26 and the role was for a 19-year-old girl. And he said, "Well, why don't you play this Eastern European Jewish woman who's 65?
That's a bit of a leap.
It was, but of course, as an actor, that was a challenge, right? 65, Eastern European Jew. So I said, of course I'll do it. And I did. And then for the next 10 years, I was the Edmonton's answer to Estelle Getty's. I played 65-year-old women from 26 to 36. So that was quite an interesting time in my acting career. But it was fun because I did, again, a lot of children's theater. They'd put me in a fat suit and I would be like, super gran. I'd be doing triple cartwheels across the stage dressed as a granny, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. Then they'd stuff me in a trunk and sit on me. Right? So a real 65-year-old actress could not have done that. That was how I got my equity card, actually, playing one of those grandmothers who's manhandled around the stage. Mrs. Oodle Noodle was her name. And Mrs. Oodle Noodle and Santa. Santa came to visit me. That was a wonderful play, actually, because it was a Victorian melodrama in disguise, and we did it for 3-year-olds in the audience, and the 3-year-olds would actually get so excited because it was a melodrama, you know, they were really into it. He's behind you, you know, that kind of thing. They'd start to toddle up on the stage and sit on my knee. And of course, as an actor, you know, this is amazing. I'm really improvising now, right? And I'd be sitting there crying with a couple of them on my knee, and they'd be asking me, well, what happened to your husband? Why did he die? And I'd be telling them and thinking, okay, we've got to get back to the script here. Anyway, that was a fun play. And they had to put me in a fat suit to do the first time. But then I reprised my role at 30 later. I think I was about 34 when I reprised that role. And that time I didn't need a fat suit. I was already fat enough. And the lipedema was progressing. So, and of course, at 30, when I had my daughter, I think my daughter was 3 when I didn't need the fat suit. So, pregnancy really kicks up the lipedema. And it did for me. I think I got sleep apnea at that time because I gained 30 pounds. I gained 50 pounds with my pregnancy and only lost 20.
Right.
And kept the rest. And the rest was lipedema, which is a form of fat that it's not really... Well, it's said that it's not losable. I think you can shrink it a lot. Like Mende has really shrunk hers. But the longer you have it, the more fibrotic it gets and the more of these hard balls it gets in it. And so at my age, 60, I don't think I'm going to get rid of it. I can shrink it a little and make it less inflamed, but I can't I don't think I can get rid of it without liposuction. But I can live with it, and I'm lucky I don't, it's quite heavy, and I've got it over probably. I think all of the extra, the fat that makes me look not normal is all lipedema, really. When someone looks at me and says, oh, she's too fat, she needs to lose weight, i.e. a doctor, what they're seeing is the lipedema there. And if all the lipedema was magically taken off, they would look at me and say, oh, she's of normal weight. I'm quite sure of that now. But anyway, the lipedema was getting there, and first child. So then I had a second child, and it got worse even. But the second child, I got another 30 pounds of lipedema. And then came perimenopause and menopause, and I got another 30 pounds of lipedema.
It's all these hormonal changes, isn't it? The periods where your hormones are really messing about, that it seems to ramp it up each time.
Yes, it does. It's puberty, pregnancies, perimenopause, menopause, and actually some women even do report if they have a very catastrophic stress in their life. Like, my parents both died, and then my brother died or something like that, within a short time. They'll say, I gained 100 pounds. They'll gain 100 pounds in like 6 months. It's just doesn't even sound doable, right? And major surgeries, sometimes, especially gynecological surgeries, can cause these. But for me, it's always 30 pounds. But interestingly, I have my own little theories about lipedema all the time. And one thing I did hear and know that all of these times I'm talking about, you become insulin resistant and you have higher insulin. Why do we become insulin resistant? Well, some other animals, I believe, don't get insulin resistance, but humans do. And those insulin resistant times help us to grow and get bigger, right? So puberty, we're insulin resistant. My daughter was insulin resistant at puberty. At 13, she had skin tags, and then they went away when she got a little older.
Interesting.
Yes. And I didn't recognize it at the time. She was just, ooh, I don't like these, Bobby. But I know now skin tags are a sign of insulin resistance. She's got lipedema, but she doesn't have as much of it as I do, because genetically she's got some non-lipedema on her Aboriginal side. But the Aboriginal side gives her the insulin resistance, because, of course, our Canadian Aboriginals, her people, they ate buffalo, basically. That was it. Buffalo and a few little herbs, little grassy type things, and some berries in season. But they were pretty carnivore. So, that genetic side, and she did get that phenotype. It's very insulin resistant. And I have the insulin resistance too. My mother with the lipedema, she's stage 3 lipedema. She looks just like me, but she's half my size. And she never did get to the point where a doctor would say to her, you're obese. Even though she had lipedema and she looked lipedemy, and, she didn't ever have any problems from it because she never got big, but she's very insulin sensitive. Even now at age 86, I can put her into ketosis 3 days. She's got better ketones than I do. And, in 3 days of just getting her in, and I'm still making her all the keto treats to keep her happy, right? I'm baking her all the keto cakes and everything. And she's still in her, her ketones are 1.7 and mine are 0.6. And I've been fasting for a day, right? So I've got the insulin resistance on with the lipedema, that sort of genetic makeup. I know from my own explorations that insulin resistance is a big deal with lipedema. It helps it grow, kind of thing. And some women are more insulin sensitive.
And have you influenced your daughter at all? Because it seems like you're saying with her that the lipedema hasn't really developed yet. It seems like the ideal opportunity to get in there with preventative action of keto or even carnivore, it sounds like, would suit her even better, but
yes,
maybe that's a step too far.
Yes, I took her to see Dr. Karen Herbst. Dr. Karen Herbst is the top North American lipedema researcher and clinician and you had to wait a year to see her. So we flew down to Tucson, Arizona together, and side by side, hand in hand, we got diagnosed together. I was diagnosed stage 3. She was diagnosed stage 1. Stage 1 is very new. Most people with stage 1 wouldn't know they had it. And a lot of women with lipedema will look at a woman who's stage 1 and say, oh, you don't have it. It's harder to detect. But of course, Dr. Herbst is the expert. So And sadly, she's getting out of something. She's moving somewhere and everybody's up in the air now. Oh, where's Dr. Herbst going? But she's leaving where she is and she just hasn't announced yet, I think. But maybe into just research, we'll see. But anyway, yes, I got her diagnosed.
What are the markers then when you're diagnosing a stage 1? I mean, presumably it comes into play, the genetic factor, but if they're just looking at her and like you say, it's not obvious, what are the things particular that she's looking for to make that diagnosis with someone like your daughter?
There's a good video if you Google, I think it's FDRS, Fat Disorders Research Society, lipedema diagnosis. You'll actually see a video of Dr. Herbst diagnosing a mom and a daughter together.
Ah.
Yeah, sort of like she did with me. She'll talk through all the things she looks for. She does a full history, of course, and a full workup and all the labs, a million labs, more labs than I could even get done in Canada. They're like, what do you want this for? And she does a full history. So, of course, if you know what your parents look like in that, and you can inherit it from both mother or father's side. Then she starts at the top of the head and she feels with her fingers. The tips of her fingers, she dances them across your flesh. And some women have lipedema all over their bodies. Like I think 4% of women that have lipedema have it in their scalp.
Really? Wow.
So she starts with the scalp and you're in your bra and your panties, right? She says, okay, strip. And then she's just like dancing her fingers all over your body and she's finding where it is and where it isn't. And she can feel it. So with a stage 1, it might just feel like the fat isn't as light. It might be slightly heavier, a little thicker. But where she always looks with stage 1s is in the cubital area. So that's at the crook of the elbow and to the side that lines up with your baby finger. So the crook of the elbow, then go to the side of there that lines up with your baby finger and then dance your fingers across your flesh to just going upwards. And she says 100% of all women that have lipedema have nodules. She's feeling for nodules. So they feel like little balls under the skin. And so she says she finds nodules in 100%, even stage 1 young, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old girls. She'll find the nodules there. Of course, looking with a mom and a daughter, if you see the mom has it and the daughter has it, and in my case, the grandmother and the great-grandmother, right? You're pretty, and then you find a few nodules. Can't remember where else. She's looking for a general look of how the fat distribution is. It will start generally on the hips and the buttocks and the upper thighs. But sometimes you'll see a swelling in the inner knee, even on a younger woman. And if they're going to be, there's 4 or 5 types of lipedema. If they're going to be a stage 3, sometimes you can already see a slight little swelling around the ankle.
Right.
I mean, not stage 3, sorry, type 3.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a type 2. I have ankles, lucky me. And my daughter is a type 1 right now. She's just has it in her. Oh, and the interesting thing, though, that Karen Herbst found with my daughter is that most of her lipedema is in her belly. Mm. And a lot of lipedema doctors from Germany even, they say, oh, well, you don't get it in your belly. But that's not true. You can get it anywhere. You'll just generally see it start in the hips and buttocks and move down towards the knees and down towards the ankles and then move up. In me, it started there and then moved down and also up. So I have it from my rib cage to my shins. Pretty well solid, and it's really fibrotic, and there are tons of nodules, some of them as big as a grape or even bigger.
Right.
And if you excised one, it would be extremely hard, like a hard. And if you took a scalpel and tried to cut it, it would be very, very difficult to cut through that. But you can, and when you cut through that, oil will come out of it, and it smells rancid.
Oh, it sounds absolutely gross.
I know, it's horrible. It's horrible, and I'm full of that. Just full of them.
Mm.
Yeah. So anyway, but my daughter has it mostly in her tummy. So at her stage, she's lucky. She's diagnosed early, and this is what we need to do. We need to diagnose early. Women should be diagnosed at age 13, when most of them start to show. And if you diagnose then, you could start the ketogenic diet, which my daughter does, and it does help her a lot. Or you could, if you don't like the ketogenic diet, you could do an anti-inflammatory diet, but you could work with the diet, right? What you need to do is get your inflammation down. You could do it's like, well, I don't want to say fascia blasphemy, gua sha or Tui Na type massage. In the Netherlands, there is a woman who's created a massage she calls quadrivas, but it's based on an ancient Chinese Tui Na type anti-cellulite massages, basically, that you can get. And they're based on, they break down the fibrosis and they keep the lymphatics flowing. You could teach your daughter to swim from the time she's born. I always tell women with lipedema who are very afraid, oh my gosh, I've had a daughter. I've just had a daughter. What will I do? I think she has it. She's only 2, but you can even see it sometimes in very young children. You say, oh yes, it looks like she's going to get it. But nevertheless, teach her to swim. They make her into a fish because swimming is the best. It's like a lymphatic massage. The water massages the lymphatics. And see, I was a lifeguard and swimming instructor from the time I was 15 till the time I was 30. And that's when I was not really progressing and I was sort of normal. I mean, I knew I still was a little out of proportion. I was 10 or 20 pounds over what I should be, but you know, and I was always working. You know, I was a runner. I was a swimmer. I could swim a mile, run a mile. You know, I could do a triathlon. I could climb a mountain. I was very, very active. But I still was about 10, 20 pounds fatter than a normal actress, right? When I would go for auditions, I was not the thin.
That's fascinating about the swimming. And I've heard that swimming is such a good exercise because it takes the pressure off your joints.
Yes.
But it's really interesting, that element of it, presumably the water pressing against your skin is acting as a massage as well. I
yes.
never thought of it like that. That's fascinating.
Yes.
And also I've always found it's one of the, although it's very difficult getting from poolside into the pool if you don't like the way you look. Once you're in there, I always felt that when I was at my biggest. I hated getting in the water, but once I was in there, it was like magic. I felt, because it takes a lot of the weight, obviously, off you, and you can swim like anyone else. And it just always felt wonderful to be in the water.
Yes. And so many women with lipedema are afraid to get into the pool, which is why I say teach your children, because my family was a swimming family. And even though they had the weirdest legs on the planet, they all went in the pool, right? We would even go on swimming vacations. And my parents, my mother's legs were just weird, but she didn't care. She showed them. She ran around. That's really good psychologically. That's the other thing. Show your daughter that having lipedema doesn't have to slow you down, right? That having lipedema I had an epiphany when I was about 27. I saw Billie Jean King play a tennis match with Carling Bassett in Edmonton. I was living here at the time. And Carling Bassett was sort of I think Carling was about 19. She was like a kind of a tennis star. She was Canadian. Of course, Billie Jean King, I remembered from her whole thing with Bobby Riggs. She was a big feminist icon, a great tennis player from the United States. So I went to see Billie Jean King wipe the court with Carling's little butt. I mean, Carling was a cute little cheerleader and Billie Jean was like 35, 34. She had my thighs. She had full-on lipedema thighs. And she beat that little Carling's little skinny little butt. And her thighs were poetry in motion. Watching Billie Jean King play tennis with those big lipedema thighs, she had the ripples. She had the cellulite. She even was starting a little bit of lobbing, but she could still move. And I watched Wayne Gretzky play hockey in his prime. And that again was like watching ballet. The man was phenomenal. Watching Billie Jean King with those lipedema thighs beat Carling Bassett. Again, poetry in motion. I'm not a sports fan. I'm an artist. But I really appreciated, and it was a huge epiphany for me. I said, wow, she has my thighs and look what she can do. Right. And at the time I was frustrated because all the girls, that I was going up for parts against I called them giraffes and I called them Barbie dolls and I called them names because I couldn't be them. Right. I was the character. I wouldn't get the lead. I would get the friend. right? Because I had an extra 20 pounds of lipedema. At the time, of course, I didn't know it was lipedema. I just thought it was ugly cellulite that wouldn't go away, right? And I couldn't diet it away no matter what I did, you know. And of course, at the time, diets were low fat, high carb diets. So, you know, I was eating rice cakes and I remember, I didn't eat any fat, like none.
So I was going to say, over all these years, were you attempting to lose weight?
Yes. So I had that 13-year-old Atkins diet, got scared off, did the high carbohydrate, low fat diets, got worse and worse, the lipedema built. After my daughter, I did fasting, only because my doctor just happened to say, oh, Deepak Chopra says, don't eat anything at night. Because my doctor is into TM and that kind of thing. So I said, oh, okay, I'll do that. So I'll stop eating at 3. So I did that, stopped eating at 3. And then he said, well, have most of your food in the morning. So I would get up and have a huge steak dinner. I'd get up and I'd run 3 miles. No, it was 3 kilometers, 3 kilometers through the ravine by my house. Then I would eat some leftovers in the fridge, which were often like steak, potatoes. It was like a big, huge, like should have been a dinner. I was eating that for breakfast. Get my daughter up, get her to daycare and that. And then at lunch, I would have a good lunch, but smaller than the breakfast. And then at dinner, I would have, at 3:00, I would have a little snack. And then I would stop eating until the next morning after my run. So I was essentially fasting, right?
Absolutely. Except
I wasn't eating ketogenically when I ate. And I lost lots of weight doing that. And that worked really well for me. But of course, you know, that sort of went out the window. I started my own theater company and theater school. So I was extremely busy, you know, running everywhere, and stopped that fasting thing. And the other thing is nobody was talking about fasting. I just sort of done that because of something my doctor said, and I tried it and it worked, right? But nobody else was talking about it. So then I had my son at age 36, and again, I gained another 30 pounds. And after that, what did I do? Oh, then I did the Atkins diet again, because the Atkins was having its resurgence, because I had my son in 1996. So there was a big Atkins resurgence at that time. Then I read his book, and I read it cover to cover. Most people don't actually listen to what Dr. Atkins said. The man was brilliant, really brilliant. If you actually read what he wrote in his book, you know, people have these ideas about what he said, but I'm like, no, he didn't really say that. Anyway, I did very well on Atkins, but again, the Atkins backlash came, right? Atkins is no good. Get off it. It's bad. It's dangerous. And so then I sort of fell off it and was, you know, doctors and people were saying, don't do it. And then I was into perimenopause. So my lipedema was progressing, and, doing the low fat wasn't working, right? Doing a lot of exercise. You know, I was still I was getting up to about 220 pounds, age 45, and I was still running through the ravine, through the snow at 200 and some pounds, hauling that lipedema down the trail. And it's heavy.
You were strong then.
I'm still really strong, because my lipedema, I had it actually tested under ultrasound, and it's some of the densest that doctor had ever seen. And it's a different doctor, Dr. Emily Eicher in Santa Monica, California, but she's a lymphedema doctor who diagnoses lipedema. She's very good if you can get to see her. Cheap flights to LA and go over and see Dr. Emily Eicher. Anyway, she said it was the densest she'd ever seen, some of the densest and heaviest she'd ever seen under ultrasound. And I do find that when I meet lipedema ladies, I always hug them and feel up their fat. And a lot of them are very fluffy. But I do find some like me. It's like it's full of water and fibrosis. It's just heavy, heavy stuff. It's like carrying weights around all the time. But luckily for me, some women, their muscles don't seem to build. My muscles built strong, carrying that around, but some don't. And they have various theories about it, whether it's the fat is impeding the muscle. But I'm wondering if EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, is very comorbid with lipedema. Even now they're starting to think it's possible that it is a disorder of the connective tissue, or it's related. So many of them have EDS, Ehlers-Danlos, which is the connective tissues are not strong, and they're very flexible. They're hypermobile. So when Dr. Herbst diagnoses, one of the first things she says is, okay, palm the floor, like you're going to do a straight leg, palms on the floor. Lots of women can do that. They're 400 pounds of lipedema, but they're so flexible. They can do yoga like nobody's business because of that EDS. I only have EDS in my wrists. I mean, a little bit of hypermobility, not EDS, but a little bit of hypermobility in my wrists. And the rest of me is actually not very mobile. So I have a different type. But anyway, I got really strong, but some don't. And it's just heartbreaking. I used to be a bus driver. I just retired from being a bus driver. And I used to pick up a woman every day. And I would swear her legs each probably weighed about 100 pounds. And she could barely walk with them. And some women, if they have the CDS and they don't build the muscle, so then they haven't got the muscle to move this heavy weight. And it's not even, and they can't get rid of it. So I had my son. I went on to Atkins again, lost weight, looked great, got into my theater company and, stopped Atkins because everyone was saying again, don't do Atkins, do low fat. And then I started to get knee problems. I think it was about 50. My knees started doing strange things. And my doctor kept saying, you're too young to have that, right? You're not old enough to have arthritis in your knees. He'd x-ray them and they'd click and they'd do things and they got worse and they got worse. And then all of a sudden I think it was about 55. I went to a party and I was dancing because of course I have to keep mobile, right? I have to keep moving. And as an actor, I knew how to do that Michael Jackson stuff, the moonwalk and the sideways one where your feet don't look like you're gliding, but you're doing a lot of work. You're doing a lot of work and a lot of it's in the knee. I didn't think about that. So I was doing this moonwalking and stuff. And then about 12 hours later, I was at work driving a bus, midnight in a bad part of town. And I couldn't walk anymore. I just suddenly couldn't walk. I had to have somebody help me out of the bus driver's seat into my car to get home. And then I was hobbling, I was really bad. I had to get 2 Nordic walking sticks. I couldn't really walk like a 2-legged animal. I had to walk like a 4-legged animal with using my arms as knees. So they were kind of broken. And I'm in Canada, so I have to do the waiting with the healthcare system, getting the x-rays. And then it took me about a year to get an MRI. But once I did get the MRI, and I was hobbling for a year, waiting for the MRIs, they found I had, with the MRIs, I got MRIs on both knees. I had ripped and torn up my medial meniscus, but it was horizontal tearing. So it was degenerative and it couldn't be fixed. So I had osteoarthritis in my knees. So then I said, well, I can't remember what happened. Oh, I was being told, you have to lose weight. When you have osteoarthritis, you have to lose weight, right? Because every pound you weigh, overweight is 4 pounds on your knees. So every pound you can lose is losing 4 pounds off your knee. So, I was being told I had to lose weight. So I was still trying to step up my activity. The amount of activities do amazes me now because I don't do that much anymore. So I was in the pool because that's the only place I could really. But of course, having been a lifeguard and swimming instructor, I was easy. I could live in the pool. Mm-hmm. In fact, at that time, I could swim 3 miles, swim a mile, but I could probably walk about 5 steps before I had to sit down. I used to think, if I was only a whale, I'd be really mobile, right? If we were in a water world, I'd be cool, right? Because I can't walk, but I can swim anywhere.
Right.
And I have the lipedema, so I can just live in water now. Clearly, I understand being a whale because I don't sink, right? That's the one thing I can't do anymore. I used to be a scuba diver. And of course, I was very good at surface diving to very deep depths. I can't get someone's goggles off the bottom of the deep end anymore. I can't get down there. Because I have so much lipedema fat, right? It's just like buoying me up. But of course, that means I don't have to tread water. I can just hang out. Right? So I was in the pool working out. And then one day I decided I had to run. I had to run against the current in the lazy river. Because this is something I had to do to try to get off this, get this weight to move. And then I got out of the pool. I went for gas. I got out of the pool. I went for gas. I got the gas. I went in to pay and someone had to carry me out to my car.
Oh dear.
It's interesting how this happens. It just breaks. So I got home and my husband had to carry me into the house. And then I couldn't walk. From that moment, I could not walk for about 2 months. I lived on the main floor of my house. I couldn't get up the stairs. I had sort of a wheeling chair at home, and then I rented a wheelchair. So I was in a wheelchair. I was basically a person who needed a wheelchair. And I thought, oh, great, I'm going to lose my job. I was on short-term disability from my job because I couldn't work. And I'm wheeling my wheelchair into the doctor. By this time, I finally got to the hip and knee clinic in the Canadian healthcare system. I'm like, okay, so I'm wheeling my wheelchair in and I'm saying, give me knee replacement. Nope, you're too fat. You're too fat and you're too young. I was crying because all my life I tried to lose all this weight, right? I was so active. I was so healthy. I mean, I ate such healthy food. I did not eat junk food. I ate sprouted grains and sprouted pulses and, all this stuff. So...
Punish yourself, yeah. To get told that.
I cried for a few days and then I said, okay, well, no one's going to help me, right? They sent me to a dietitian. What did she tell me? Eat very low fat, very high carbohydrates, and very low calories.
And move even more.
Move even more in that wheelchair, honey. Yeah. So I did, dutifully. I cut my calories. I think by the time I finished with her, I was on about 900 calories a day. I still wasn't really losing.
Miserable.
Yeah. But I wheeled my wheelchair to the edge of that pool and I dumped myself in, right? And at first, I just drugged my legs. I couldn't even kick. But I did that daily because now I had no job to go to. My job was to get out of that wheelchair, right? And of course, in frustration with this low-calorie diet, I began fasting because I said, if I only get 900 calories a day, I may as well just eat them in one meal, right? At least I won't feel so bad after the meal. I'll feel like I've eaten something, and then I can just fast the rest of the day.
Good point.
Yeah, that's when I looked it up because then I knew it had a name, intermittent fasting, and I looked it up. And I found some stuff by these funny bodybuilders or something. I didn't find Dr. Fung right away. Anyway, so I was fasting and doing all this stuff, but I started to think about my legs and think, okay, there's got to be a connection to the way my legs look and why they're so disabled at such a young age. And I just Googled lumpy legs and it all laid out in front of me.
It's funny what comes up with
holy man.
What search, yeah.
No doctor had ever said anything to me because none of them know about it. It's not 11% of all women have this disease. It's highly debilitating. It even contributes to people's deaths, early deaths, very painful deaths. And nobody knows about it. Almost no doctors know about it. In Canada, the number of doctors who know what lipedema is, it's probably a handful. Only because the fabulous Dr. Stutz from Germany comes over and does talks and a few of them hear them. Or women with lipedema educate their own doctors. And at first, of course, the doctors don't believe them. But we did get an ICD code. The World Health Organization gave us one, I think, about a year ago. So now lipedema exists as a disease and a condition. But I don't think the US has a code yet, and Canada certainly doesn't have a code yet, but at least World Health Organization has a code for lipedema, a code for lymphedema, and a code for lipolymphedema, which is when lipedema progresses to the point where your lymphatics just stop working properly, you will get lymphedema from the lipedema.
Yes, Mendy talked about that.
Yes, and that's when you can be in real trouble. If you don't know what you're dealing with, you can be in huge trouble. Because that's when you get to the point of, cellulitis that can kill you. And another comorbid thing that I think maybe killed my grandmother, because nobody knows how she died, it could have been blood clot. DVTs seem to...
Oh, yes, that makes sense, yeah.
There's a circulatory aspect to it, too, and a lot of women with lipedema have their veins don't work properly. So they have venous insufficiency. They tend to blood clots, things like that. It's just a travesty. It's a horrible thing. If men had this disease, we wouldn't be in this situation. If men had this disease, it would have been treated in, when it was first well, there's a picture of a queen from an Egyptian queen on the painted on the pyramid. That Egyptian queen is painted with lipedema.
Really?
They've even drawn in her knee lobes.
Really?
And her ankle. Yes, it was existing back in ancient Egypt because they were eating lots of grains, right? Ancient Egypt, they had lots of grains and they had lots of heart disease, as Ivor Cummings says. And they had lipedema in the queen because she had enough food to get enough. I think insulin resistance is part of it as well. That's my own personal thing.
To get the resources and links from this show, please go to ketowomanpodcast.com/episodes. Please share this podcast with as many people as possible by sharing one of my links or just taking a screenshot of an episode that you enjoyed. Reviews really help raise the profile of the podcast, which gets it in front of more people, but also helps me attract a wide variety of guests. So please take a minute to leave a review on whichever podcast app or platform you like to listen on. It doesn't go unnoticed by me, the people who regularly like, share and comment on my posts. Your support really does mean the world to me. Thank you. Are you enjoying this podcast? Help me make more episodes and videos by making a pledge at my Patreon page, patreon.com/KetoWoman. Or simply hit the support button on the Keto Woman Podcast website. Don't forget to join in the fun on the Keto Woman Podcast Instagram and Facebook pages, and Daisy_Keto Woman on Twitter. Are you my next extraordinary woman? Maybe you've got an idea for a show, a topic you would like to hear about. Let me know how I can tickle your earbuds by dropping me a line at daisy@ketowomanpodcast.com. This week's end quote is from Adam Levine. Fitting in is boring for anyone who wants to be extraordinary. Bye bye, Keto Lovelies.